Welcome. I'm Provost Ralph Hexter, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the fifth event in the 2017-18 season of the UC Davis Forums on the Public University and the Social Good. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the lecture series, the UC Davis Forums was established in 2012 and presents about a half dozen lectures each academic year by experts from a range of disciplines. The series was designed to promote informed and thoughtful dialogue among members of the campus community and the public about the serious challenges facing public university, public higher education altogether, and the ways of responding to those challenges, and how public higher education is evolving, with an ultimate goal of producing public higher education that will best serve society and individuals. This series poses the following question: what should and can public higher education be in the 21st century? Previous this season, we've heard Sylvia Hurtado speak about how to grow diversity and promote success for underrepresented minority students in STEM disciplines. Michael Storper and Mary Walchuk about how universities have differently affected the development of 3 California regions. Sarah Ahmed about the need for complaint to battle sexism, and Sean Harper about how American universities persist in racism. Today's forum will address yet another topic, but one that's quite relevant to the focus of this series. We're very privileged to welcome Chancellor Francisco Rodriguez of the Los Angeles Community College District, who will speak on how community colleges function as powerful engines for economic and social mobility. I trust I'm not giving away the punchline if I note here that the California Community College System and the University of California must be close partners in providing educational expertise and opportunity to students of all backgrounds. Now, Chancellor Rodriguez is so distinguished a guest that he will have not one but 2 introductions shortly, a team effort, I understand. But first, before I yield the podium, just a few thank yous and announcements. I'd like to thank everyone who've made the event possible. First and foremost, Chancellor Rodriguez for agreeing to come to our campus to participate in this series. Next, the UC Davis Forum Steering Committee, led by Martin Kenny, Professor of Human and Community Development, and also our 2 moderators for this event, Professor Kenny and Professor Carlos Jackson of the Department of Chicana and Chicano Studies. Then I must also acknowledge the many campus units that have joined my office to sponsor this lecture: Community and Regional Development Program, Department of Chicana and Chicano Studies, Community Development Graduate Group, the School of Education, and the Center for Regional Change. Looking ahead, I encourage everyone to attend our final forum of the year. On May 14th, Emmanuel Saez, Professor of Economics at UC Berkeley, will discuss the role of colleges in intergenerational mobility. For information on this and our access to video archives of past events, please visit the series website at forums.ucdavis.edu. And there are chairs in here. Please come on and fill in, and people who've got spaces next to them, if they're available, please invite people, because there's no reason for anyone to stand. Don't be shy. Okay. One more announcement. After today's presentation, there'll be a Q&A period and then a reception just outside this room. You're all invited to stay for talk and refreshment. And now, Professor Jackson.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Carlos Jackson. I'm an associate professor, currently serve as chair of the Chicano Studies Department. It's an incredible honor to be here introducing Francisco. Martin Kenny is going to do the more formal introduction, and I was kind of tasked with providing maybe perhaps some color. So, Martin. What an honor to be here today to introduce Francisco, who is an inspiration to so many of us in the room. Francisco, it's interesting, just in like the 5 minutes that I was sitting here, a couple of like Roxana and Andrea, Roxana Reyes or Andrea Gatan, both like recalled to me like these very important and formative memories of Francisco's role in their lives. Francisco worked at the early academic outreach program early in the day, and a very emotional kind of story of Francisco driving Sonia Cortez, current justice in Yolo County, to the campus, her first experiences, or Roxana sharing Francisco's kind of role as a DJ, or early, the person who really created La Onda Chicana, which was the first kind of KDVS Chicano-oriented music show that was also like a political forum for local community members in order to have broader access to the knowledge that was being formed within the campus. And then Francisco was here also when the Cross-Cultural Center, when the student hunger strike happened, when Andrea Gaitan, now the director of the AB 540 Undocumented and Student Resource Center, was a student on a hunger strike in order to kind of demand the university to provide more resources to these historically marginalized communities. And Francisco ended up being one of the first directors and coordinators there at the Cross-Cultural Center who mentored a generation of student leaders, activists who are now doing incredible work across the state and the nation. I also know that Francisco has been a mentor to many of the people who are currently working in higher educational leadership, who went through Sac State's Higher Educational Leadership Master's Program, many who work on this campus, and it's a reminder that my experiences as being mentored by, inspired by Francisco's leadership are not unique. That Francisco has inspired a generation of workers who are now at multiple levels in their academic or professional careers, not just at universities and community colleges and high schools in the region and across the state, but more broadly than that. But I'll just share a very, very brief memory, and that's that I first really got to know Francisco when I was developing a community-based art center called TANA, Taller Arte de Nuevo Amanecer, or Della de la Torre was chair of the Department of Chicano Studies at the time, a project that I co-founded with Malaquias Montoya, emeriti faculty in our department. And we were developing a community advisory group, and Francisco was the person who helped form that effort. Francisco was writing his dissertation, I think in Jim Grisham's cubicle at the library in the summer. And I was writing my book, and I was carrying a stack of books across, and I saw Francisco sitting there. And I walked up to him and told him, Malaquias and I have this idea. We want to extend the undergraduate community-based art curriculum out to Woodland. Will you help us? And Francisco, like not really knowing me, said, of course. And said, well, on Saturday we have a community meeting. Will you come? He said, of course. It's a person with a family who was already running a college, who had incredible service requirements across the region, and then showed up on that Saturday on time. Thank you. And then I said, will you moderate, the discussion? He said, of course. Francisco's generosity to all the people that he's touched, it just feels infinite, and his commitment to constantly pulling people up is something unparalleled, and that this campus should be one of the greatest things that this campus should be proud of, is having a relationship to Francisco Rodriguez. I'd like to thank the forums for the public university and the social good for having him here today, so that we can hear his leadership, his transformative vision in LA, but also so that we can again be reminded of all of the incredible work that he's done for many of us here on this campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost Hexter and Professor Jackson. As Carlos has already told us, Francisco is a graduate of Chicana and Chicano Studies, and I first met him when he was a student in the Community Development Graduate Group more than, I think it's 20 years ago. We don't talk about the years anymore, and have followed his career since then. I'll just give a few high points of his career, as it's really nearly impossible to describe all of his achievements. Just a few recent accolades can give you a flavor for his success. While at the LA Community College System, he led efforts to pass the $3.3 billion bond initiative for local facilities, and he's participated and organized the hiring of close to 500 faculty. He serves as the chair of the National Science Foundation's Advisory Committee for the Directorate of Education and Human Resources. He's the director of the Board of Education and Higher Education and Workforce for the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, president of the California Association of Latino Community College Trustees and Administrators Association, is an appointee of California Governor Brown Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. He's a past president of the Cal Aggie Alumni Association, thank you, and director of the UC Davis Foundation, again, thank you. And perhaps most important of all, earlier today, he took the time to speak with Chicano Studies students, undergraduates, to give him a little bit of a view, give them a little bit of a perspective on his career and what to learn, what we can learn from him. And then he gave a wonderful talk to community and regional development undergraduates and community development graduate students today. So we have squeezed him pretty hard today, but he's got a lot of energy and he's going to give us another wonderful presentation. It's truly an honor to have him speaking with us today. Let me turn the floor over to Francisco.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Wow, that was a very generous introductions. Thank you so much, Professor Kinney, my professor in my graduate program, and a good friend and colleague, Carlos Jackson. Thank you for a wonderful day. You know, of all those accolades, I'm still doing the same thing. Don't confuse who you are with what you do. It's the first lesson here. And coming back to UC Davis is like coming home. This is a fertile ground that helped to shape an English language learner, a first-generation college student, a student who was searching for something powerful to do, perhaps. And perhaps unmask, unpackage desires and talents and interests that I myself didn't know I had. So many of you in this room have helped to nurture and guide that this journey is never done alone. I'm very proud to be an alumnus of this institution. Very proud to represent Chicano Studies everywhere I go and to support the development of ethnic studies and gender curricula, no matter where I'm at, and to do the important work that I believe those of us who believe we are public servants that we are asked and must do. So Provost, thanks so much for putting this lecture series together. I think it's absolutely important that the public's interests have a forum and the role of the university be examined, be challenged, because I believe that as educators, to both support the institution of education, at the same time we need to challenge it. At the same time, so I'm going to relay some prepared comments around those particular themes. So thank you for the kind invitation to be here. And very soon I'll be with my colega down in Southern California as the new president of San Diego State University, Dr. Della Torre. So congratulations. Congratulations. So, all right. So, and I could spend the next hour recognizing every single person in this room that's had some kind of impact, but I'm not going to do that. Let me just say thank you. You know, in my native language, which is my most intimate thought language, if you will, gracias. Ustedes son un orgullo y para mí una inspiración. You are both my pride and my inspiration. It's good to see some former students here who are doing some tremendous things as well. So let me stop there, else I'm going to go on and get off my script altogether. But let me tell you how powerful it was, as I'll I'll finish with this, to walk into this building and to see the engagement of students, all kinds of students, engaged in study, engaged in communication, engaged in building community. Could only have imagined this right after the hunger strikers were demanding more institutionalization of diversity, equity, and inclusion activities. And now you see this as part of the normal space of an institution. It's the responsibility of the institution, such as this one, if we are to be called great, to provide safe places of engagement, to provide places where ideas can collide, clash in an environment of trust and rapport. And that's what I see going on here. So I commend all of you who were involved with the development of this. It's nice to see the Cross-Cultural Center, where I spent a good part of my career, now in a place coveted by other support systems that allow students to ultimately to be successful. So I congratulate all of you who are part of that. Powerful, powerful. It is perhaps the best retention and persistence tool we can have to create a safe environment for our students, particularly now with the rhetoric that would suggest that certain types of individuals should not be in college or should not be in our communities. And of course, those are all falsehoods. That's all fake news, as it would be said. So let me just begin. I do have some slides to go through, some prepared comments. And then if I do my job well in keeping time, there should be plenty of opportunity for some engagement and some interaction. So again, welcome. And I hope that you are both enthused by what we're sharing, both challenged by what is shared, and then maybe find a way to utilize your skill set to advance the university, to advance community colleges, and the public and social good. So with that, let me just read off some things. So here's what I'm going to cover today. If I do my job, I'll talk a little bit about the changing landscape of higher ed, the premise of this talk, economic and social mobility, the opportunity and performance gaps that still exist in our communities, a little bit about the entire system called America's Community Colleges, give you some insight as to what we're doing at LACCD, and final reflections. It's a lot to cover, but I'm committed to do so. I think it's fitting that we begin this conversation as we think about the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King, who was in Memphis, Tennessee, supporting sanitation workers who, 4 years removed from the Civil Rights Act, 3 years removed from the National Voting Rights Act, were still struggling for wages and conditions that were commensurate with their worth, that were commensurate with their professionalism. That's why he was in Memphis. So perhaps the discussion of the public university and the public good, we should be reminded that that's some of the efforts that took place before us. You know, more local to me, this is also the 50th anniversary of the walkouts of East Los Angeles, when thousands of students said enough, when they demanded better schools from the LA Unified School District, demanded teachers and curricula that were more responsive to their needs, and demanded a school setting, facilities that were more commensurate with their academic aspirations. And it caused now a generation of others that follow from these walkouts to be indeed inspired to do the good work. And I'm proud to be part of that activity now, and now to be part of the legacy of so many educators like Sal Castro and others who remind us of the important work of an equitable, fully accessible, affordable, high-quality public education. And the responsibility we have in our civic society to ensure that that always occurs, to never jeopardize that. That's the goal, right? Right there. That's the goal. So let me get to some comments. And here's the punchline. Our nation's strength, economic health, and prosperity, and democracy depend on the inclusion and success of all its participants. For society, more community college graduates generally means higher incomes, more civic participation, greater economic mobility, increased tax revenues, and less dependence on social services. And many of you in this room study that and research that area. Expanding access to quality education is the key to making opportunity available, and absolutely significant and important to closing America's deepening divide. strengthening the middle class, and ensuring that our nation's economic vitality is indeed ensured. But here is also what's important. Opportunity in our country continues to be distributed disproportionately as our nation becomes more diverse, as outlined in this slide here. We experience persistent gaps in education, income, and wealth, and these gaps, indeed, my friends, is widening. These gaps are widening. As a result, it has been said and studied that the American middle class is shrinking, that the so-called economic polarization is increasing. I saw an example, and I'll share with you recently, and it said in 1970, 65% of Americans lived in a middle-class neighborhood, and today that figure has dropped to 42%. The decline of the middle class coincides with decreased economic mobility because education and economic opportunity, they're so closely intertwined. Expanding access to education and workforce training programs such as those provided by the community colleges for underserved students and residents through local community colleges creates major economic benefits to the regional economy and a labor force equipped with the skills that indeed employers need. Meanwhile, America's demographic diversity is growing. So I would suggest that unless our course changes, the fastest growing segments of our population, like the ones represented here, are the least likely to have the opportunities they need indeed to succeed. So enter the American Community College. An often misunderstood and forgotten branch of higher education. It is timely that community colleges are receiving well-deserved national attention of late. Attention is being paid to the significant roles community colleges play in transferring students to the universities, like UC Davis, through accepted courses, and to building the middle class through workforce training, and to elevating adult literacy in this country. Our career and technical education programs are structured to provide the necessary 21st century workplace skills, and many have partnerships with local industry and are designed to address regional workforce needs of employers and employees. 1,100 two-year colleges, career and technical colleges, community colleges, and 12 million students in this country who enroll in our system can't be wrong. The American Community College system is indeed the most egalitarian system of higher education in the world. We're a very selective institution. We accept the top 100% of the graduating class. All of them, without exception and without apology. At the community colleges, we are proud of and reaffirm our values as open access institutions whose hallmarks of affordability, accessibility, and outstanding quality are wrapped around an ethos of care and commitment. A commitment, in my view, to the goals of academic excellence, public service, diversity, and equity, unparalleled in any segment of higher education. Here at our community colleges, every student is welcomed. We accept learners of all ages at any point in their life. Our colleges are beacons of hope and opportunity. For many of our students, it's the first chance to go to college. For some, a second chance. But you know, for many, the last, and I would even suggest only chance to go to college. Again, the most egalitarian system. Today's community colleges could be called the modern-day Ellis Island, if you will. Key to bolstering this, the educational outcomes of our students, is the need to examine our institution and the patterns of our students. The dialogue surrounding institutional performance and student success at the two-year system is resounding, with virtually every community college in the country focused on the ways to improve the student success rates of its students, with special emphasis being paid to those students who have been historically underperforming, who now make up the growing proportion of our enrollments. Shifting to economic and social mobility, it's my contention that our country cannot reach its full potential and promise as a democracy unless all of its participants are fully enfranchised and prepared to contribute to the economy and engage effectively in this so-called democracy. Expanding access to quality education is key to making opportunity available and key to closing the deepening gaps that exist, to strengthening the middle class, and again, to ensuring our nation's economic vibrancy. You know, our gathering today in this lecture series, I hope reminds us in a very significant and powerful way that we have much more work to do to level the playing field and to redress the vexing reality that educational access and academic success is realized by students in a disproportionate fashion. It's realized disproportionately by color, by gender, by zip code, and by income levels. Again, opportunity in this country continues to be disproportionately distributed. And let me read from you from a study that was done out of Georgetown University, the center over there, run by Carnival and Stroll. The report is called Separate and Unequal: How Higher Education Reinforces the Intergenerational Reproduction of White Racial Privilege. It describes low-income students and students of color disproportionately attend community colleges and less selective four-year institutions. It posits that white students are more likely to enroll in selective colleges. Students of color are most likely to enroll in open access colleges. White students represent 62% of the college-age population, yet they represent 75% of the students at the 468 most selective four-year colleges, and only 57% of students at open access institutions such as 2- and 4-year schools. In contrast, African American and Latino students represent 33% of the college-age population. They represent only 14% at the 468 most selective colleges and 36% of the students at open access institutions. The opportunity gap is still there. From the American Associations of Colleges and Universities, through their report called Step Up and Lead for Equity, What Higher Education Can Do to Reverse the Deepening Divides, back in 2015, they talk about completing college and its improvement in economic mobility. Too few students of color complete college, the inequalities in spending per student, and the deep economic gaps that persist for Latino and African American students. So let's first start with college pays powerful and economic social benefits. And you can see from the slide here from the Pew Charitable Trust just how much an education makes a difference in the income quartile over time. It does make a palpable difference. In 2011, median earnings of full-time workers with a bachelor's degree was $21,000 higher than those of high school graduates. And the benefits of education extend beyond individuals who hold degrees. One study in this report looked at the impact of increasing the four-year college attainment rate in the 51 largest U.S. metropolitan areas. A 1 percentage point increase in the four-year college attainment rate is associated with about $856 increase in per capita income for each of the 51 metropolitan areas. You know, if you put all that together, that's a total increase of $143 billion for the nation, a 1% increase in college attainment. That's powerful if we think about if we had more than 1, 2, 3%, and the contributions that it could make to our society, to our communities. Degree holders also contribute more to the tax base, and the research shows have greater civic participation, greater participation in voting, more volunteerism, healthier, longer lives. The benefits of a higher education go on and on. But too few students who are low income complete college. While post-secondary institutions, again this comes from the report, are becoming more diverse, the degree attainment for low-income individuals is widening. In 2013, individuals from high-income families were 8 times more likely to earn a bachelor's degree by age 24 than were those from low-income families. In 1970, high-income individuals were more than 6 times more likely to earn a bachelor's degree. So you can see it's widening. From 1970 to 2013, bachelor degree attainment among those from wealthy families nearly doubled, while it barely moved for those with the lowest incomes, the poorest families. Deep economic gaps persist for Latino and African Americans. The educational gap for Latinos and African Americans is accompanied by an income gap. We cannot attain our nation's goals unless everyone has an authentic opportunity to contribute to our economy and to engage in our democracy. Here closer in California, many reports, particularly those by the Public Policy Institute of California, have talked about the shortage of workers, particularly middle skilled workers, and those that require a bachelor's degree. It states that California faces a shortage of highly educated workers. Economic projections to 2030 show that about 2 in 5 jobs will require at least a bachelor's degree, while demographic projections suggest that only 1 in about 3 Californians will retain this kind of education. This shortfall equates to about 1.1 million workers. If you add sub-baccalaureate credentials, those that are offered by the community colleges, a deficit of more than 2 million workers with degrees or credentials stands in the way of meeting the needs of this great state of California. And there's the income gap that I mentioned to you. It's significant. Let me now turn to the next slide. Okay, is everybody with me so far? Okay, great. So from a study, again, I'm trying to set up that there's lots of studies that have been done to really advance the opportunity and income gaps that exist amongst Californians. And here's another one that I commend to your reading that came out recently, in February 2018, from California Competes, the Higher Education for a Strong Economy. And this was a report described as opportunity imbalance for California, race, gender, and California's education to employment pipeline. And it says, and I quote, while California's economy rapidly adds higher paying jobs, millions of Californians fail to qualify for these opportunities because they lack the required credential or degree. With lagging college participation rates, too few Californians can benefit from the state's projected economic growth, and many employers look out of state and overseas for the right talent. So identifying inequities in the education to employment pipeline is critical to effectively closing the degree and credential gap. So there's just a couple of key findings that I'll share with you from this study. It breaks it out, again, the study described as an opportunity imbalance. The Latinos in California earn the lowest median wages of all racial ethnic groups, but they also show the largest improvements in high school completion and college enrollment. African Americans experience the greatest educational gender disparities, with African American women having much stronger educational outcomes than African American men. And still, Native Americans in California suffer from the lowest workforce participation rate. Consistent across all ethnic groups, high school graduation rates are improving steadily, but college completion rates are not following the same pattern. Women fare better than men in educational outcomes. Women in the workplace earn less than men, often because they are employed in lower paying occupations. And then the rural regions fall behind urban ones in both education and economic outcomes. California's statewide high school graduation rate has improved from 77% in 2010 to now 84% in 2016. Across all groups, high school graduation rates for women are higher than those of men. African American and Native American students still graduate from high school at the lowest rates in California. Let's talk now about eligibility. And that by the way, my slides don't necessarily coincide with my comments, because then I want you to listen and look. You can do both. You've noticed that, huh? I learned that from a professor. This gives just a profile of the American community college system, the diversity. There is no larger system of public higher education in the world. Over 40% of all persons who are freshmen every year attend a 2-year school. The vast majority of veterans, of single moms, of foster care youth, of students who are formerly incarcerated attend a community college. Again, we accept all who are interested in benefiting from higher education. This just gives you some of the important data. But you'll notice a huge number of students are part-time. Why? Because many of them need to work while they're going to school. In my district, for example, just one caveat, 51% of the students that we serve, of the over 200,000 students in our system, are at or below the poverty line. That influences everything we do. Our policies, our programs, our services. So we have to think about who our students are and ultimately serve them well. So this is just a little bit of data on the American higher education system. Let me go back to eligibility for a moment. Among high school graduates for the state's publicly funded four-year schools, UC and CSU are improving, but not nearly as quickly as some would suggest that the state needs. The production, if you will, is waning. Across California's high school graduates, only 40% of men and 51% of women in 2016 completed the credits necessary to attend the state's four-year institutions, the A through G requirements. But these rates are much lower for Latino, African American, Native American, and Pacific Islander students. That's why it's important to disaggregate the data. When we did that at our institution, we found out that Hmong, Laotian, Vietnamese, Tongan, Samoan students were failing worse than Latino male students. You can't do that unless you disaggregate the data and look more closely, not just lump it into an API, if you will, community and data set. So I would recommend that for those of you who are looking to do this work. These rates, I mentioned, are lower, and the rates are also lower in the rural regions of the state that often don't have all the A through G courses that are required for UC or CSU eligibility. Again, women in every racial group have higher UC and CSU eligibility rates when compared to men. So this talks about some of the key findings that I mentioned already. The great state of California. These are our community colleges. It's 114 California community colleges, 2.1 million students throughout our institutions, each governed by a locally elected board of trustees, 5 or 7 member board of trustees. As you know, it's an outgrowth of the K-12 system. Sometimes it's called K through 14. So in some cases, our curricula is indeed the curriculum that should have been taught in high school. We call that remedial developmental education in English and math. The rest are career and technical education courses leading towards degrees and certificates, or university transferable courses that push our students out to the four-year schools. You're probably aware that 3 out of every 10 University of California graduates began here. And 5, almost 6 out of 10 California State University graduates began at one of our two-year schools. It was envisioned in 1960, the Master Plan of Higher Education, that every Californian would have accessibility to a high quality and affordable education. 1960. And many persons in this room benefited from a very low cost, in some cases, free higher education from California. We're now trying to return to that. The California College Promise movement is but one step in the right direction. It's embedded within this year's budget. Assembly Bill 19 was signed last fall from the governor. Our district was the lead sponsor to push that forward. That will guarantee every Californian, beginning this fall, 1 year of tuition-free education. Every Californian, irrespective of zip code, station in life, or where they are. And if they, in the now, with that in mind, we hope that that will inspire, incentivize students to attend the community college. But they must enroll full-time, and they must apply for all the federal and state aid available, and they will be given priority enrollment and be guaranteed a full set of full-time enrollment classes and the supports that will allow them to be successful. So that's the deal, and we're hopeful that that will push, and we think it will already. We began the Los Angeles College Promise, our district, last year, guaranteeing admission to any one of our 9 colleges to any student who graduates from LAUSD. And last year, just in 1 year alone, we saw a 14% increase in the number of students from LAUSD to one of our 9 colleges in 1 year, and 42% increase in the number of students from LAUSD, the second largest district in the country, who are going to our colleges. 42% are going full-time. And that, you know, when you go full-time and got supports around you, you're successful. When you nibble around the academic edges, take 1 or 2 classes, it takes you forever to get out. Ask Manolo Redas, the counselor at American River College. He always encourages full-time enrollment if you can, as a cohort model. Full-time dedication. So we're hopeful, and we expect that the movement of a California Community College Promise movement will allow more students to gain the accessibility to a higher education. These are the eligibility rates that I talked about before. And it is improving. My screen doesn't correspond to that. That's why I keep looking up. This is the solo system. The number of students transferring is increasing. That's very, very good news. Projections are. So that's very good news for California in terms of the production of students who could be available, and for the CSU as well, California State University. This is the opportunity gap that I mentioned before. Okay, let's talk about where I work. This is the beautiful LACCD. Welcome to the country of Los Angeles. The area that is lighter is what I call our service area. We're one of 72 distinct California community college districts, again, all governed by a local board of trustees. It encompasses 36 cities and unincorporated areas. It encompasses 5.2 million residents and 9 separately accredited colleges. So this is what we call the service area. It's the largest in the country. And to give you a sense of the profile of students that we have, well, this is the number of students at our colleges. This gives you a sense of the profile of who we serve. This is California. This is the future of this country. So this is in many ways an experimental ground for social policy, educational policy, fiscal policy. It is a breeding ground for innovation. It is a place where if we could make it work here, we could scale it, make it much more generalizable for other urban as well as, I think, rural settings as well. We are pleased that, and you'll see that some of our work has actually led to some improvements in student success outcomes because we've been very intentional about that work, because of who we hire, because of the policies and practices, and because we never forget that our students in general, even though or because they come from families that don't have a formal higher education, it shapes the kind of environment. It's important for us to, at our institution, to signal to students every step that they take on campus that we care as colleges and universities and that they matter. So I would ask you to think about your department, your program, that how are you signaling to students that your program cares and that they matter? What are the signals? What are the virtual, intentional signals of that? And if you start thinking about that more holistically, some simple ideas come to mind, about how you can, in fact, create an ethos of care, an ethic of care, an ethic that you can, an ethic that you will, an ethic of support. Because the students who come to a place like UC Davis, they could do the work academically. The socialization, integration is what makes it more difficult. It's not the academic part. That can be learned and supported and mentored. It's the other pieces to your ethos. Don't look at it through a singular lens. So we can't. The fact that our students are first generation, most of them, you see, half come from low-income families. Okay? But 50%, let's call it, want to transfer. So their aspiration continues to be high, but their interest in other areas is important there. We're trying to incentivize the part-time, full-time thing is our biggest battle. So that's why the College Promise. We have so much hopefulness that will change the narrative. Our students who are in those, who are full-time, who are in programs like EOPS, who are in programs like Puente, in programs like Mesa, where they have to enroll full-time, they do exceedingly well. It's the students who, again, nibble around the edges, take 1 or 2 classes, don't do as well. They're not connected to the institution. They're not connected in ways that could make them ultimately successful. Some of the things that we're doing, and I love that picture, by the way. That's a student that received her high school diploma. Complete elation. First in her family. Breaking the cycle of persons not going to college. And in our institutions, our commencements are coming up, and I can't tell you how proud I am to shake the hands of students who get their degrees. And with their degrees, they're breaking the cycle of intergenerational poverty, intergenerational incarceration, where through a community college, because they're welcomed, because they're accepted, because they have supports that allow them to get through, they're now changing the narrative completely for their family. Even a 2-year institution can change the complete trajectory of a person's life alone. Now, we want them to do more than that. But that alone, you saw the economic benefits already, but even as minimal as a 2-year education can change the trajectory of some of our students. So I mentioned the college promise here. Governor Brown signed that. We're bolstering dual enrollment where our community college classes can now be taught at a high school. During the school day, the school receives its ADA, average daily attendance. We receive the FTES. You have to work out agreements, but it's our college faculty teaching classes to the students free of charge, no cost. And now we've built in a support system to have textbooks be available. So we're extending that. And we have a bill right now that would extend our work not just to the public schools, but the public charter schools and parochial schools. It's being authored by Miguel Santiago. We're the lead sponsor on that. Because in Los Angeles, our parochial schools and our charter schools are full of poor kids. The economic, let me rephrase that. The moral imperative drives the educational imperative here. That is that these students deserve and can afford to be and would benefit from a higher education. Why not our system going into those schools and saying, we want our faculty to teach your courses, these kinds of courses that allow you dual credit for both high school and college. So we're big on that. Adult education, improving literacy is super important. In Los Angeles, I've never been at a place in Los Angeles that is so starkly different. And what I mean by that is, in the one hand, you see incredible wealth in Los Angeles. Wealth like I've never seen. It's Los Angeles. You've got some places, and within blocks of there, abject poverty and disenfranchisement in ways that are very visible, within sometimes blocks, sometimes miles of each other. That's the kind of environment that not everyone is benefiting from the quote unquote wealth of our community. So adult education is one way that we reach into the community. Our anti-recidivism work. Some of the most powerful graduation ceremonies that I attend are those where we have a partnership with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition down there, support group, and also our Los Angeles and Orange County building trades unions. And we have a rigorous multi-week program where students who are selected have to go through this incredible training of academics, and they learn the building trades. 100% attendance is required. But at the end of this program, they're guaranteed a union job and a union wage in carpentry, in electricity, in plumbing, so on and so on and so in. And they guarantee it. It's a partnership. We've had 3 cohorts already, over 100 students placed, and 100% retention so far. It works because we have partners who believe in what we're doing. We provide the education. The other coalition provides the supports around that. And then the unions provide the jobs. I mean, it's a wonderful way to think about how we reintegrate the hundreds of thousands of persons who are going to be coming to our communities once they leave a life of incarceration. And if we want to stop recidivism, we want to stop that, give a person a job. That's the number one thing. You want to stop them returning? Okay. So the only other thing I'd mention here is, I go on and on. Obviously, I am. Let me just talk about our Dream Resource Centers. In this environment now, in a new federal climate, we have established Dream Resource Centers, DRCs, at each of our college campuses that allow our students a place that is safe, a place that has support, a place where we outsource and bring in community resources, legal resources to help our students better navigate a tumultuous, uncertain environment. We had a real dip in our students from fall of 16 to fall of 17, of about 20% of our undocumented students. It is stated right now that the state of California has around 76,000 undocumented students in its public higher education system. 61,000 at the community colleges, about 13 or 12 or 13,000 at the Cal State universities in their 23 campus system, and about 3,000, 4,000 in the UC system. But the vast majority in the two-year schools, obviously. And so we're about 20% of that group in the California community college system, just LA alone. And we lost 1 out of 5 students, just did not return. So we're rolling out a whole strategy to get our students who are with us to stay and those who have left to return. Because of the messaging, the negative, if you will, the welcome mat is absent. So we're trying to return to that spot there. And then so that's important for us. And I simply wanted to mention the probation office of ed are working with students coming out of the juvenile justice system. We have big restorative justice activities at our school because of the students that we serve. And we've focused in on transgender education as a new effort for us, just to complete a summit a couple of weeks ago. And then we co-locate with this building program that we have that was been referenced, co-locating job centers at our college campuses. We don't do that very well. We train, we educate, but job placement, we don't do that very well. We don't. So we said, we'll provide the space, you bring your team, city or county, or a nonprofit, and you do the job placement work, and it works out. It's a mutually beneficial partnership. So those are just some of the efforts that we got going on there, and I can, during the Q&A period, answer anyone much more about those. Here's our College Promise students, mentioned earlier, and just some strategies that we have suggested to move the needle, if you will, for student success. Here's what our institutions are doing. Some of you are doing this already in your institutions. I would suggest that these are some of the evidence-based strategies that do in fact work for moving students through the educational pipeline. Give you a chance to take a look at those. Deals with hiring. And then this is the one that I think where we could use maybe your help. That is better understanding that intersection between poverty, poor health, and educational attainment. There's some in this room that do research on that. We could stand to be assisted in that area. That clash, that intersection, the impact of these vexing factors of poverty and poor health. And in our institutions, that's, before students can learn, they're dealing with those kinds of issues, some of them. So better understanding that would be very helpful for us in terms of our work and our policy work. Of course, hiring individuals who have an interest in this kind of work, who are vested in the solutions, is absolutely key. That's how you signal to your students that you care and that they matter, by who you hire. It's that simple. For those of us who are administrators, our legacy is who we hire, who we think will be part of this institutional family for a long period of time. And like the University of California and other higher education institutions, but for community colleges in particular, when a person is hired with us, they tend to stay for their entire careers. Entire careers dedicated to the craft of community college education. Maybe not in the same role, but typically at the same institution, and most likely in the same segment. That's the last one here. And I mentioned some of these in my comments. So I'm going to go through this quickly because I'd love to leave some time here. So these are the results. We could certainly do a lot more, but we're gaining in our transfer students. 2/3 go to the California State University. Most of our students are place-bound. They want to stay local to where they live now, so they look to their local college or university. And degrees and awards, we've done some really good work in that area there. So starting to make some progress in that area as well, the gains over time. All right. Let me read some comments and then I'll close here. Let me start with some final reflections. Here they are. All right. So I wanted to seed some thoughts today, with the principal thought being that our colleges, our community colleges, are the economic engines to drive a healthy local and national economy, to drive economic and social mobility for a large and increasingly diverse segment of our society. I believe that community colleges are perhaps best positioned to train, educate, and upskill residents the knowledge, skills, and abilities to compete for 21st century knowledge-intensive economies. Opportunity, as has been shared in our country, continues to be disproportionately distributed, however. And our colleges and universities, I believe, are the nation's best investment in human capital and most powerful equalizer for the disparities that exist. Expanding access to educational and workforce training programs for underserved residents through the local community colleges creates economic benefits to the regional economy and to the labor force equipped with the skills that indeed employers need. And for us who work in the two-year system, we view this as a moment in time, an opportunity for our nation and states colleges to be agile, to be responsive, to be nimble to the particular needs. And educational attainment, as has been seen, correlates to higher lifetime earnings and to the lower vulnerability to automation that we're seeing that's very, very prevalent. Our academic programs at the community colleges are aligned with labor market supply and demand data, with labor market information that supports industry-driven career education and workforce development programs. For those of us who call ourselves, I would even say the audacity to call ourselves community college educators, it's easy to see why higher education in general and community colleges are such wonderful places to work. It's here where we can intertwine our professional craft as educators with our personal values. While the overall trends in high school graduation rates, college completion, and employment are indeed improving, they can mask stark challenges and disparities for different populations, such as the educational outcomes of men of color, workforce outcomes for women, and overall outcomes for rural residents. To secure the stability and vibrancy of our future economy, the country and state must incorporate what I would describe as an equity-mindedness, a lens of equity for improving completion and workforce outcomes. Understanding and disaggregating trends is a first step to securing a strong and vital future for the state's diverse citizenry and, of course, our economy. Improving access and outcomes among groups that have been historically underrepresented in higher education, including low-income students, for first-generation students, is essential if we are to close the skills gap. And to close this gap, and it was referenced earlier by the provost, all segments of higher education will need to play a role, a closer intersegmental role for increasing access, transfer, and ultimately completion. And the intersegmental cooperation that is needed amongst our segments right now is vital. And we have to do everything we can, not just to prepare the students, but to ensure that the University of California has the capacity to accept our students and the capacity to serve them well. So that's part of our responsibility as well as co-inhabitants of the public higher education space in California. The news for California is indeed promising. College prep among high school grads has increased. Students completing the A through G course patterns, I think, are relatively high. Demand for UC and CSU absolutely remains strong, and the transfer pathway is indeed improving. At the community college, some of the reforms that we have in place and that we'll implement, such as guided pathways in our student placement and other reforms in developmental education, acceleration, they're poised to bolster student success and to increase transfer. So as I shared at the beginning, our nation's success depends on having a quality higher education system that extends the advantages of an education and potential for economic prosperity to all of its students. In fact, what I would say, sort of here, that our democratization depends on it. Depends on it. So those are my prepared comments. We've got some time now for some reflections, some questions, and I'm happy to talk to you about that. And I'll just leave that up. Yeah. Here's a slide that I show every person that I hire. I said, if this is you, welcome to LACCD. Every single one of those. Just a little final reflection. And if we were to get to a second finalist interview, this is the cheat sheet. Say, yeah, an advocate, a connector, a disruptor, a purposeful disruptor. facilitator, funder, and then obviously a tone setter. You know, the public gives us three things. Huge amounts of resources, not enough public resources. They give us their children to educate, but most importantly, they give us their trust. So it's really important that, you know, in the higher education family, that we never forget that we're a public institution, that we need to safeguard all three of those, covet all three of those. You know, the public good that emerges from safeguarding that is immense. And the jeopardy that follows if we don't can be devastating, particularly for under-resourced and historically disenfranchised communities. So I wanted to just, you know, thinking about the theme, and again, I think this is fabulous what you're doing, bringing people together to talk about this in a public space. This is in the best tradition of our academic traditions. So I thank you for that. So anyway, that's the goal, folks. Thank you very much. All right. Oh, you're going to facilitate?
I'll.
Okay.
Martin asked me to facilitate, but
Cool.
I think Francisco can handle it.
No.
Yeah. And for those, we have about 15 minutes for converse. 15, and then we'll take one more question after 15 minutes, and then I'll tell all the students where the free food is. So I'll let Francisco get back to it.
Please, Gloria.
I wish I could sing. All right. So my name is Gloria Rodriguez. I'm an associate professor in the School of Education. One thing that you didn't mention specifically, but that I know has been embodied in a lot of your career and the legacy of the work that you did here at Davis as well, has to do with Hispanic serving institutions.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if you could help us by sharing a few lessons that you feel that you've garnered both from your own work at four-year institutions, but also particularly with everything you're describing, that I think has some resonance for those of us who are trying to push ourselves to a higher standard of HSI that goes beyond enrollment.
That's right.
And so could you speak a little bit to the
Sure.
lessons about
Sure.
that the UC system should have in mind?
Okay. Well, and there's been some lessons learned, and thank you, Professor Rodriguez there. Well, first of all, if the goal is simply to get 25% enrollment and that's it, that falls flat on what the real intentionality and the real promise of HSI is. Because enrollments are one thing, and one should strive for that. That is, that there's the plurality of students that represent a particular group, in a group that's been historically underserved and underrepresented in higher education. So, but the goal should be, once you get that designation, and then now you're eligible to apply for federal support, what does that actually mean? What it does is it should give us, who are looking at HSI status, an opportunity to look at where along the educational pipeline the leaks occur. Where do students pop off? Where do they stop out? Where do they get disillusioned? How do you assess the quality of your services, of the experience? So in other words, utilize the movement towards HSI status as a way to look at your entire educational ecosystem. Who teaches? What's the curricula? What are your goals? What are your outcomes? If you disaggregate, what does that look like? So my sense is that the thoughtfulness behind putting together an application requires you to have that kind of thoughtful sort of unpackaging of those programs. The lessons learned are that both good and bad. The bad pieces have been when we simply chase grants. You know, that is, that there's a dollar amount and you go for it. I would ask, one of the questions that I ask and that I would ask you to think about is, if you're going to apply for a grant, you know, a Strengthened Institutions grant, an HSI STEM grant, or anything of the sort, and you're just going to layer it on top of another existing program that doesn't work, let me ask you, why do you still have that program that doesn't really work? In other words, besides saying, here's what we want to do, I'd ask, what are you going to stop doing? Because many times, academic administrators, and I'm guilty of it as others, you know, particularly in other parts of my career, it was like a chili bowl. I just add ingredients, add stuff, without, obviously, sometimes you have to take out the dysfunction and say, we're not going to do that any longer, and have the courage and audacity to do that, to say these programs aren't producing the kinds of results that we find to be useful. It's very hard because we simply just build and make it, community college people in particular, maybe higher education in general, but we have this insufferable disease called more. More. It's just more, and it's more. Rather than saying, how do we best utilize our resources, what's the most efficient, et cetera. And that's harder to do, to stop doing something. So that's a lesson learned. But for us, it was in disaggregating the data, looking at the educational pipeline, if you will, and where the leakage is, has been the greatest sort of get real disciplined about what the grant is intending to do. And then say, well, if the grant can't fill these gaps, why don't we put our other institutions' support towards this? But in an environment of confined resources, you've got to decide what you're not doing anymore and redirect it to the things that do work. So some thoughts there.
Thank
Yes,
you.
yes, Tati.
The tsunami of students that are coming from all over California, the United States, especially Latino and students of color, do you feel that the University of California, CSU, and even community colleges have Latinos and professors of color and leadership positions to reflect that population that's already here?
The answer is no. And if you want to look at specific data, I commend your attention to the recent Campaign for College Opportunity report that just was released about a month ago called Left Out. And it talks about the demography of college and university administration from UC, CSU, community colleges at the senior level, at the faculty level, and at the academic senate level. And some districts are doing better than others, but the main narrative that emerges from those reports is that we've got a lot of room to grow. And in fact, some of the gains that were made have been somewhat thwarted of late and flattened out. So the answer is no. But a larger question is why it matters. Is it educationally purposeful to have faculty that look like your students? And the research suggests yes, not just to the students who are being served, but to the entire institution. So that discussion is not just hiring for hiring's sake, but why it matters. To have folks who understand, folks who can connect, folks who speak the language, folks who have a lived experience, if you will. But any institution, irrespective of how the demography works, looks like, can have an equity mindedness and look through whatever issue that the institution has or program has through an equity lens to say where are the disparities. And just look at data can become super important in this regard. Hi, Jim. Yes. Go ahead, Jim. Yes.
The first question is not for you, Francisco. It's like with the students raising their hands. I'm curious to the audience here. Who among here has had a community college experience? Wow, quite good. The question for you, though, is for UC Davis, be it administrators, faculty, students, staff, how could they assist, your community college or the community colleges here locally to do a better job?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think one of the ways is part of what you're doing now. You have a co-located Sacramento City College Center here on the west side. That's fantastic. The co-location, I think, signals an opportunity for students to have access, if you will. And that is because they're already, in many ways, on the university campus. So that's one. But two is to look at your articulation. Look at your course-to-course work to make sure that you have the courses and accept the courses. This is really faculty work, to accept the courses that we offer as transferable. Many times, for whatever reasons, when we submit the curricula, there could be one or two things off and then it's not accepted. So looking more holistically and having more opportunities for those kinds of courses to be accepted as part of the lower division academic preparation is super important. Third, I would say to develop a program similar to what the CSU has in the associate degree for transfers. That is, if we have approved schedule of courses that the CSU will accept, and if you fit into the associate degree for transfer sequence, you are guaranteed admission to the university in that particular major in junior standing. It takes the mystery out of other units that you might need, if you will, before. Because a student doesn't want to come to UC Davis and they're still sophomore standing. They really don't. They've done that. So clear support. And I would say more engagement, more outreach. That's why the TANA program, I think, is so important. It really connects the Woodland community to the university, unlike anything else that we have. So that program becomes an academic as well as a real important connection. I can remember Davis is only 7-8 miles away, but in some cases, years ago, it must have been 700 miles away. It was, the university was its own ecosphere. Now, you need to bleed the edges a little bit. So then after that, I would say that, so you got coursework, you got articulation, you've got associate degrees for transfer, and ultimately, our students need support. We don't want our students to come here and be part-time students. So bolstering the financial support through scholarships, other kinds of aid that students can get is super important. By the way, our district has a bill going through the legislature now that would extend the Cal Grant eligibility from 4 to 6 years. This way, our students, when they're at our institutions, can have the full Cal Grant eligibility, thereby going full-time, and not save the money for the more expensive university, because that's what they're doing now. So look out for that. That's a Santiago bill as well. So we'll hopefully get your support for that as well. So those are just some ideas, Jim, to extend, to engage. This is a public university, and you should have local students who live in the area attend here at high rates. So, you should. Yeah. Hey, Bill. These are all my friends. These are all planted questions, by the way. Bill Lacey, another colleague.
I'm not sure you're going to agree with that.
Okay.
But thank you very much for a very thoughtful and informative session. Now, you laid out a number of roles that a leader can play.
Yes.
And among those was disruptor.
Yes.
I wonder if you'd be willing to share with us some of the examples from your career where you were an effective disruptor.
Is this on camera? Well, okay, let me sanitize the version. But I'll share some themes. One is, the disruptor is, and I've mentioned this before, in who we hire. Be willing to stop a search if you don't have a pool of candidates that you think best represents the current and long-term interests of your college. Disrupt it, stop it, halt it, and have the audacity to do that. Because the notion that individuals aren't available, they're not in the pool, we can't find them, I just refuse to believe that. So that's one. So being a disruptor is saying we will not move forward with the search until we have administrators and our faculty that can serve the interests of this institution today and tomorrow. So that's one. Two is in disproportionately allocating resources. It's easy to have a formula with inputs and outputs. It's sort of the difference between equality and equity. In equality, you give everybody the same. In equity, you give people what they need. And in some cases, like for example, the institution that I'm at, there are some institutions where our funding formula does not work for them. It doesn't work. Because of their enrollments, because of their infrastructure, because of the students that they serve, the particular needs, academic needs of that institution. So you have to be willing to say, we're going to move away from this traditional formula and give institutions more than their fair share and be willing to take the heat for that. So that's the other part of it too. I'll give another example of a disruptor that was done by the state, not by our institution. Beginning fall of 19, and Christian is aware of this, through Assembly Bill 705, the Irwin Bill, we're going to place students based on their high school or past multiple measures past performance straight into college level classes. We're going to skip the remediation, development education, purgatory, where some students land and never get out, straight into college level work. Because some of the research suggests, and data suggests, that students do as well, even better, if they get the right support system around them to do those kinds of work. That's a very disruptive college placement, if you will, activity there. So those are just a few. But I think ultimately it's in with who you hire, with how you allocate the resources, the policies that are in place. For us, we've been very open, very clear about support for our undocumented students. Some think that it puts us in peril. I think it's the moral and right thing to do to ensure that our student records are safeguarded, that we have no cooperation, if you will, with any kind of federal agency that would extend upon our academic shores, if you will. Obviously, you have to have all the credentials and everything, but just to come on campus because they suspect someone is undocumented is completely, I think, irrational and not in the public interest. So we sort of stand out on that as well. So those just a few. There's probably a few more that I could share. We could do that over a glass of wine. But you have to be, as a leader, I think you have to be vulnerable. That is, you have to say, if this is not you have to be willing to take significant risks to move an agenda forward. And if it means leaving your job, losing your job. And I know that's kind of like the highest order of sanction, if you will, for an administrator. But if that's what it means, then that's what it means. I think we have to stand on our moral principle. We have to stand on our moral convictions and do what's right. I mean, the disparity of success when you disaggregate is simply unacceptable. So the issue is how we put together a system that provides better opportunity, more support, and ultimately better outcomes for the students that we serve. I think our students have to be at the center of the conversation always, and do what's best for them, and let the chips fall where they may. So I've been fortunate to work with some really, really, really good people. I noticed that Sara Esposito Noy is here. She's the superintendent president of Solano College. She and I worked together at Casamas River College. I worked for her, I should say. She was a vice president while I was the president there. And, we did some good work together. But our notion of disruption was to build an organization that could carry on the sort of equity ethos well after we're gone. And I think it has. So that's part of it. So part of our responsibility is to create conditions where good things can happen. And that's what we've done. But we're not done yet, though. We're not done yet. There's still quite a bit to normalize some of the things that we have embedded as dysfunctional practice, just to get rid of some of that stuff. If we don't pivot, then we actually we unknowingly perpetuate institutional bias and, unknowingly perhaps embed, I would say, disadvantage. And that's something that those of us who think about this a lot should always guard against. So, good question, though. Thank you, Bill. Yes, tell me your name.
My name is Anna Sandoval. I'm a freshman student.
Hi.
My question is, what advice would you give a student that is interested in working in higher education, especially to support underrepresented communities?
Yes. Well, my first piece of advice is do it. Yes. Welcome. There's a lot of people in this room who have done just that. It's an opportunity for you to combine your interests, your values with your profession. And when you can do all that, there's nothing better. So the advice I would do is first of all, you have to think about what you mentioned. There's a lot of space within that to work. That is, in which sector do you want to work, in which area? As an academic, student affairs, or the other side. I mean, that's kind of, so start to disaggregate and then get some experience in that area. I began my work as a work study student working in EAOP, where Rogelio now is the director. I began as a student work study. Someone pulled me out of the library. I was lifting boxes, loading boxes, and in the library, Martin Flores said, "You want to be a math tutor in algebra?" Because I was an engineering student. I said, "Sure, I can do that. Better than lifting boxes, So And that led to working with Manuel Redas, and then now to a career in education. So I would say combine those lived experiences and those work experiences with something that you might think doing. But it's worth doing. It's absolutely worth doing. I connect with the mentor. Many are in this room. And as a first-year student, the fact that you're thinking about that already, I think is really good. Connect to the community. Our schools locally could stand to have a role model like you. Are you kidding? A university student at their high school, their middle school. You have amazing currency that you may not realize that you possess. Currency, that when you show up on a high school or middle school campus, a university student is something that maybe they've never seen. So I would say to use that currency in a way, for the social and public good, and whatnot. So, yeah, I'm glad you're interested. We need you. We need you in our work.
Hi, my name is Didia Fong. I work in the Mexican consulate. Our Consul General, Elena Ferrer, couldn't be here, so I'm sorry for that. And only want to let you know that we are organized some activities to provide information to the students, not only Mexicans, and not only to enroll, but to graduate. And Della de la Torre, who is in here, and Manuel Ruedas, we work together with the CSU to provide this information and organize, for example, Step to College Fair every year to provide this information to the students, and also to provide them scholarships, like IME Becas 100 Amigos scholarships. So we are pretty proud to be here, and thank you, and I want to congratulate you for your presentation, and that is my, thank you very much.
Okay. Sure, hi.
My name is Mia Perez. I'm actually the student director for Collective, the National Student Support Program here, and my question was, how do we support students who are not involved in community programs such as Puente and Tila and Bailan? How do here at the university, faculty, staff, and students such as myself better support those students who may not have the capabilities to becoming involved with different resources and programs on campus?
So the question is, how do you get greater student engagement?
Yeah.
And which population is this? Students who are sort of disconnected?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, do you know how to reach those students?
That's my problem. I just...
Okay. All right. Well, so there may be some, I'm trying to think if you have access, because there's FERPA laws and privacy laws and those kinds of things. First of all, you got to find a way to connect with students. Maybe there's someone in the organization that could actually, through use of social media, other kinds of technology, really to kind of spread the word in terms of that. Because, one of the worst things about the university, especially one as large as this, is the notion of isolation. As big as this place is, you could also feel very alone here if you aren't connected to the right support system. So I would say initially, to look at your onboarding process. When students come in, which ways do they get acculturated to the university? What messaging do they say? How do they even realize that this group even exists? So look at your current sort of architecture of how you communicate with students to see if there's a place to do that, and a place to communicate with them directly that doesn't violate their privacy, because some don't want to be connected to forever. So that's the first thing. The other is good old-fashioned boots on the ground outreach. Sing from the mountaintops, as they say. If there's a service that you're providing that is valuable to students, use your networks, use your social network, use the buzz of the kind of the power of technology to get a buzz out there in a way that's in the students understand in their language. What you don't want is a university speaking in administrative ease. That scares students away. It doesn't feel as welcoming as a peer or a student or whatnot. So I would say that. I don't know enough about how that communication angle works here. For us, we use messaging. We use text and we use social media to connect to our students, and it works. It's the distribution, the amount of hits, if you will, and the amounts of impressions are pretty significant. And it's got to be in 30-second segments or videos, or it's got to be quick. we put a memo together, well articulated with our signature. Who cares? Like, we have to communicate in a way that students understand, in a way that's friendly, welcoming, and I think our students make the best authors. So and then have some kind of maybe signature event where you can draw people, create a buzz. It doesn't take much. It's about building community, ultimately, and then once you build community, you can build your capacity. So
with that, I'm going to cut in and I'm going to say, Martin Kenny has some food for us out here through the door. Would you like to share the menu or? Oh, geez, Martin.
So the UC system, as you know, is about 20% out of state and increasingly out of country. It's globalized. You've talked a lot about the local, in a sense. But the UC system, in some senses, you can see is being pulled towards the global. Undergraduate students from overseas that pay relatively high tuition that then create some opportunities for cross subsidies to other students. How do you see that from the community colleges? How do you see that kind of changing demographic of who the UCs are serving?
Yeah, well, if the question is how we see it or how I see it as a community college person, I think that's going in the wrong direction. That is, and it's unfortunate that strategy of international out-of-state students as a revenue source to make up for what the state doesn't provide, that is a calamity, and that is short-sighted, in my view, on behalf of the state. And there should be a larger investment in the state's public higher education infrastructure. But universities have had to utilize that. I think, unfortunate, perhaps consequence of that kind of strategy, it was 20% or however long it is, that when we do that, and because you have capacity issues here of only a certain number of seats, it leaves out the student from Dixon, from Winters, from Woodland, from Davis, that is well prepared, wanting to go here, meets all the academic credentials, meets all the requirements, and can't get in. And so I think that's a public relations nightmare in some ways, where we can't accommodate our own local students. The issue is you should be funded, our system should be funded to serve students at a high degree of quality. So I don't want to say threatened by that, but I think we would view that as really redirecting seats that should be more available for local students who meet all the academic eligibility requirements to come in. What is it in the University of California now is less single digits, right? State funded now. So the sort of privatization of the university is also a huge interest and a huge concern, if you will. But you've had to do that for your survivability in some ways. I mean, you've been left no option to provide a high quality institution. So I would say, there's no easy solution to that. The answer is always in striking a balance between those, because students are enriched by out-of-state students. They are enriched by the international student presence. They are, clearly. But at the cost of, if you want to put it that way, local students, state students who can't get access to their local public great university, I think that's moving in the wrong direction. So I would support, and I have supported, those efforts that allow the institution to get the kind of resources it needs to open its doors, to increase its capacity, and maintain high quality. We would always do that because our students deserve that. Californians deserve that. We're paying for some of that. So that's what I say. Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right.